Have you ever felt that mixture of excitement and anxiety when you receive a message from someone you're interested in? That simple hello that appears on your screen can trigger a whirlwind of emotions and thoughts. What do they want? How should I respond? Should I wait a bit before answering? All these questions stem from something much deeper than a simple digital interaction. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of all time, taught us that every human interaction is a reflection of our inner world. That message you just received isn't just text on a screen. It's an invitation to a psychological dance where your unconscious and the other person's begin to communicate at levels that go far beyond words. Think for a moment. How many times have you responded to a message out of fear of losing someone's attention? How many times have you replied immediately, showing too much interest, or waited hours to appear busy or unattainable? Jung would tell us that these responses aren't coincidental. They're manifestations of your unconscious patterns, your shadow, your complexes, and above all, your relationship with yourself. The way you respond to a simple hello says more about you than hundreds of deep conversations. Because in that moment of decision, in that instant where you choose which words to use, you're revealing your true relationship with your inner self. And this is something Jung understood deeply. Every message you send is a projection of your psychic world. Jung explained that we all wear social masks, what he called the persona. It's the part of ourselves that we want to show to the world. When someone texts you hello and you enter that spiral of anxiety about how to respond, what's really happening is a conflict between your persona, the mask you want to project, and yourself, who you truly are. And it's in that small moment of tension where your authentic level of connection with yourself is revealed. What if I told you that the way you respond to a message could completely transform not only the dynamic of that relationship, but also your own relationship with yourself? What would happen if you started responding from authenticity, from the integration of your shadow, from the understanding of your internal archetypes? This is where Jung's wisdom becomes revolutionary. Most people respond to messages from one of these two places, from the need for approval or from the fear of rejection. Jung would call this living from the complex, allowing those unconscious emotional wounds to dictate your actions. But there is another way, one that can transform every interaction you have, starting with a simple message. Before I show you exactly how to respond to fascinate whoever writes to you, we need to understand what really happens on the psychological level when you receive that hello. According to Jung, that moment activates what he called the shadow. The shadow is that part of us that contains everything we've repressed, everything we don't want to see about ourselves. And curiously, it's in interpersonal relationships where the shadow manifests with the greatest intensity. When you receive a message from someone who matters to you, your shadow immediately projects your own fears, desires, and expectations onto that person. If you fear abandonment, you'll interpret that hello differently than someone who fears intimacy. If you seek constant validation, that message will mean something completely different than it does for someone who feels complete by themselves. Jung taught us that the key to authentic relationships lies in the integration of the shadow, in recognizing those dark parts of ourselves so they don't control our interactions without us realizing it. And it's precisely in everyday moments, like responding to a message, where we can begin this profound work of integration. Now imagine for a moment that you could respond to that hello not from need or fear, but from a place of authenticity and presence. How would that change the energy of the conversation? How would it transform that person's perception of you? And more importantly, how would it make you feel about yourself? For Jung, all our interactions are guided by what he called archetypes, those universal structures that inhabit our collective unconscious. When someone writes to you, it immediately activates certain archetypes in you, perhaps the lover, the wounded child, the sage, or the warrior. The key is to recognize which archetype is taking control and consciously decide from which energy you want to respond. This is where the real magic begins, because when you respond from archetypal awareness, from the integration of your shadow, and from the authenticity of yourself, that person will not only be fascinated, but will feel a connection with you that goes far beyond the words on the screen. The first rule for responding and fascinating whoever writes to you is to do what Jung would call being present with your unconscious. This means that before responding, you should take a few seconds to connect with yourself. Ask yourself, how do I really feel about receiving this message? What is it activating in me? From what place do I want to respond? This small moment of self-awareness completely changes the energy of your response. You're no longer automatically reacting from your complexes or wounds, but consciously choosing how you want to interact. And this presence, this authenticity, is magnetic for anyone. The second rule is to respond from what Jung would call the totality of the self. This means not fragmenting yourself, not showing only a calculated part of you. If that hello excites you, allow that excitement to be present in your response. If it generates curiosity, let that curiosity guide your words. Authenticity is the most powerful aphrodisiac in any human interaction. Think about the times you've received a clearly calculated message, those responses that sound rehearsed or manipulative. How did they make you feel? Now contrast that with those responses that felt genuine, where you perceived that the other person was really present. The difference is enormous, isn't it? The third rule, and perhaps the most important, is to respond from what Jung would call individuation. This means responding in a way that honors your own path of growth, your own truth, without sacrificing who you are to please or impress the other person. Jung firmly believed that each of us has a unique path of psychological development, what he called the process of individuation. This path leads us to integrate all parts of ourselves, to reconcile our internal opposites, and to become more complete beings. And curiously, it's when we respond from this place of completeness that we generate an almost magnetic attraction in others. Now, how does all this translate into practice? How do we concretely respond to that hello to fascinate whoever writes to us? This is where Jung's wisdom becomes applicable to your daily life. First, avoid generic responses. A simple hello back or a how are you doesn't reflect your individuality, your unique essence. Jung taught us that each person has a unique psyche with combinations of archetypes and experiences that aren't repeated. Your response should reflect that singularity. For example, instead of responding with a generic, "Hi, how are you?" you could say, "I was just thinking about you while reading something about topic that connects you. How has your day been?" This response not only shows that you're a reflective person, but also creates a bridge of genuine connection and opens the door to a deeper conversation than the usual exchange of courtesies. What you're doing here, from the Jungian perspective, is activating the archetype of the connector, that part of you that naturally establishes meaningful links with others. This archetype is incredibly attractive because we all crave authentic connections in an increasingly superficial digital world. Another powerful strategy is to respond with an unexpected question that shows your depth. Jung believed that we all hunger for meaning and purpose. When you show that you're a person who thinks beyond the superficial, you awaken interest and curiosity. For example, instead of responding with a simple hello, you could say, "Hello, what's been the most interesting thing you've discovered about yourself lately?" This question activates what Jung would call the archetype of the sage, that part of us that seeks understanding and meaning. And when you activate this archetype in the other person, you create a space for a much deeper connection than the usual exchange of banalities. A third fascinating strategy is to respond from what Jung would call synchronicity. This means recognizing the meaningful coincidences that connect your inner world with the outer world. For example, you could say, "What a coincidence! I was just thinking about you when your message arrived. I was remembering that conversation we had about topic." Do you believe in coincidences, or do you think there's something more behind them? What you're doing here is creating a bridge between your psychic world and that of the other person, suggesting a connection that goes beyond the rational. And this, from the Jungian perspective, is incredibly powerful, because we all crave connections that transcend the purely logical or material. But there's something even deeper that happens when you respond from these places. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, that layer of the psyche that all human beings share and that contains universal archetypes. When your responses resonate with these archetypes, you generate a connection that the other person feels at an almost visceral level, even if they can't explain it rationally. For example, when you respond with authenticity and vulnerability, you're activating the archetype of the lover. Not in a romantic sense necessarily, but in the sense of someone who is capable of connecting, feeling, being present. And this archetype resonates deeply in all of us because we all crave that genuine connection. Jung also taught us about the importance of balancing opposites in our psyche. When you respond to a message, you can show this integration by being both strong and vulnerable, fun and deep, interested but not desperate. This ability to inhabit different energies is magnetic because it shows an integrated psyche, which Jung considered the ultimate goal of human development. For example, you could respond, "Hello to you too. I was in the middle of a pretty intense day, but your message made me smile. What brought you to my chat today?" This response shows several aspects of you. Your ability to acknowledge difficulty, honesty, your ability to find joy even in difficult moments, resilience, and your genuine interest in the other person, connection. This integration of different qualities is deeply attractive. Now, it's important to understand that this approach isn't about manipulating or applying techniques to catch someone. Jungian psychology is not a tool for manipulating others, but a path to better understand ourselves and our relationships. What I'm sharing with you aren't seduction techniques, but invitations to a more conscious, more authentic, and ultimately more satisfying type of communication. It's also crucial to understand that different people will resonate with different aspects of your authenticity. Jung spoke of psychological types, recognizing that we all have unique predispositions in the way we perceive the world and make decisions. Some people will resonate more with your intuitive aspects, others with your sensory side, some with your capacity for deep thought, and others with your ability to feel and connect emotionally. The beauty of responding from your authenticity is that you'll naturally attract people who resonate with your true essence, with whom you can create genuine and mutually enriching connections. You don't need to please everyone, and in fact, Jung would say that this attempt to universally please is a symptom of an unhealthy relationship with your own self. Also remember that communication is a dance, an exchange. After responding in an authentic and conscious way, observe how the other person responds. Do they show openness to this deeper type of communication? Do they respond from their own authenticity, or do they remain at a superficial level? These responses will give you valuable information about the potential of that connection. Jung taught us that all our relationships have a purpose in our individuation path. Some people come into our lives to help us heal old wounds, others to show us aspects of ourselves that we didn't recognize, and others as fellow travelers with whom we can grow mutually. Keep this broader perspective as you navigate your interactions. It's also important to recognize that this approach requires practice and patience. Responding from authenticity and psychic integration is not something we master overnight. It's a muscle we develop over time, through constant self-observation, reflection, and the willingness to face our own shadows. Jung believed that the true work of life is inner work, the process of knowing ourselves in all our complexity. And curiously, it's when we do this inner work that our external relationships begin to reflect that integration and authenticity. Every time you receive a message and choose to respond from your truth, from your full presence, you are not only transforming that specific interaction, but also strengthening yourself in your own path of individuation. You are practicing what Jung considered the supreme art, the art of being fully human, with all your contradictions, your shadows, and your lights. And here is the deepest truth. When you respond from this place of integration and authenticity, the fascination you generate is not a temporary spell or a superficial attraction. It's a soul-level recognition, a resonance that transcends the purely rational or social. It's an invitation to a type of connection that can be genuinely transformative for both. Jung understood that we all crave this type of connection, this resonance that makes us feel seen and understood in our totality. And when you dare to communicate from your truth, you're creating a space where this type of connection can flourish. So the next time you receive that hello and feel that mixture of excitement and anxiety, remember Jung's teachings. Take a moment to connect with yourself, to feel from what place you want to respond. Choose authenticity over strategy, presence over manipulation, truth over appearance, and then respond from that place of totality, of integration, of authenticity. Not to catch or fascinate anyone, but to create a space where a genuine connection can be born, a connection that honors both your path of individuation and that of the other person. Because in the end, as Jung taught us, our most significant relationships are not those where we play roles or wear masks, but those where we dare to show ourselves as we are, with all our lights and shadows. And it's in that act of courage where we find not only the deepest connections with others, but also with ourselves. Now I want to ask you a question. Do you remember a time when you responded to a message from a place of complete authenticity, without calculating every word or worrying about the impression you would make? Do you remember how that freedom felt, that alignment with your inner truth? That's the power Jung spoke of, the power of living from your authentic self in every interaction, however small it may seem. I invite you to try this approach the next time you receive a message, any message, not as a technique to impress, but as a practice to connect more deeply with yourself and others. And perhaps you'll discover that the real magic isn't in fascinating others, but in discovering the fascinating complexity and beauty of your own being through each interaction. If this message has resonated with you, if you've found value in these reflections based on Jung's wisdom, I invite you to share it with those who might also benefit. Because in an increasingly digital and superficial world, we need reminders of the depth and meaning our interactions can have, even the most everyday ones. Remember, every message you send is an opportunity to practice authenticity, to integrate your shadows, to live from your total self. And every response you give is an invitation to a type of connection that can be truly transformative, both for you and for whoever receives your words. If this video has inspired you to communicate in a more conscious and authentic way, I'd love to know how this journey is going for you. Leave me a comment sharing your experience or any insight that has emerged for you. Have you noticed any patterns in the way you respond to messages? Any shadow you've identified in your digital interactions? I also invite you to subscribe to this channel for more content that explores the wisdom of great thinkers like Jung and how to apply it to our daily lives. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos and share with those who might benefit from these reflections. Remember that this journey toward authenticity and psychic integration is exactly that. A journey, not a destination. Each interaction, each message, each hello is an opportunity to practice, to grow, to get a little closer to that totality Jung spoke of. And before I say goodbye, I want to leave you with this final reflection. The next time you receive a hello and find yourself calculating how to respond to make the best impression, pause, breathe, connect with yourself, and then respond from your truth, from your presence, from your authenticity. Not to fascinate anyone, but to honor the fascinating complexity and beauty of your own being. Because in the end, as Jung taught us, the most important relationship you will ever have is the relationship with yourself. And it's when you honor that relationship in every interaction, however small it may seem, that you begin to experience the type of connections we truly crave as human beings, those where we are seen, understood, and valued for who we really are. Thank you for being here, for dedicating your time and attention to these reflections. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring together the mysteries of the human psyche and how we can live more conscious, more authentic, and more fulfilling lives. Until then, dare to respond from your truth. Authenticity is the true path to connections that transform.